Just ahead on One Detroit. Mayor Mike Duggan promotes Detroit's comeback in his State of the City address. Nolan, Finley, and Stephen Henderson offer their thoughts on the mayor's speech. Plus, we'll check on the state of Detroit's paratransit system with a Detroiter who relies on the service to get around. Also ahead, a conversation with renowned jazz drummer Gayelynn McKinney. And we'll have suggestions on what you can do this weekend in Metro Detroit. It's all coming up next on One Detroit.
From Delta faucets to Behr paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Support for this program is provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV, the Kresge Foundation.
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public TV, among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving. We support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Visit dtefoundation.com to learn more.
Nissan Foundation, and viewers like you.
Just ahead on this week's One Detroit. As the city of Detroit works to improve its paratransit services, we'll talk with a rider about her experiences and hopes for the system. Plus, one of Detroit's most accomplished musicians, Gayelynn McKinney, opens up about the obstacles she's faced as a female drummer. And One Detroit contributor Cecelia Sharpe offers some ideas on things to do in Metro Detroit this weekend and beyond. But first up, Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan delivered his 10th State of the City address this week at Michigan Central Station. The mayor pointed to Ford's renovation of the long vacant structure as an example of Detroit's ongoing transformation. One Detroit contributors Stephen Henderson of American Black Journal and Nolan Finley of the Detroit News sat down to discuss the focal points of the mayor's speech.
And here's what Coleman Young said in 1981. I make no apologies for tax abatements. The 116 companies that have received abatements have invested nearly $500 million of their own money in Detroit. And of even greater importance, I believe, are the 3,000 new jobs we brought to Detroit. 40 years ago, Coleman Young understood that when you have a good-paying company with good-paying jobs and benefits, every city and state wants them. This is hand-to-hand combat to get these companies into Detroit so that our residents can get them, and nothing has changed today.
The thing I found interesting about this speech was how hard Duggan worked to sell this idea that tax abatements for big billion-dollar projects are necessary. And going back and invoking Coleman Young, quoting Coleman Young, and noting that Coleman Young did these tax abatements back in the 70s and 80s. I mean, he seemed to be really concerned about community pushback to the tax abatements that this, in particular, the District Detroit developers are going to get.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of questions about it. And my big question that no one seems to address or be able to address is, look, when we were sold on, the first round of tax breaks for kind of the modern redevelopment of downtown Detroit, if you think about the stadiums, right? Late 90s, early 2000s, one of the lines that they used was this would make the market more rational and more investor friendly so that we would over time need less of this in order to attract people to develop things. But here we are 23 years later, and the Illiches and Stephen Russ have asked for, by my calculations, in raw numbers, the largest subsidy that we've ever given anyone, and it equals half the development cost. Things seem to be getting worse on that front, not better. And so one of the questions is this just something that developers have gotten used to and have decided they want as part of these projects, or is it really something that we need? The mayor saying we have to have these things because of high taxes. I guess I'm not sold anymore that that's the case.
Well, I do believe that Detroit is not yet market rate for investors. I don't know if it'll ever be market rate for investors, but I also believe that as long as these these breaks, these abatements are available, people are going to go for them. I mean, it's become part of the business plan, and you see it at every level. Look, I mean, the state of Michigan paid $700,000 per job for that Ford battery development out in Marshall. So, I mean, it's becoming the way business is done today. Now, the mayor makes the point that it's not a subsidy, it's not a tax break. We're not giving them anything, because if they didn't build this, we wouldn't get any dollars in taxes off of it. So we're just getting less dollars in taxes than we might expect. I don't know if that's an argument that washes, but he clearly was concerned about getting community buy-in to this.
Yeah, I also feel like some of the language here is deceptive. This idea that we have moved from subsidies to abatements, no question, right? Back when Coleman was mayor, we were giving subsidies, we were writing checks to people to do these kind of things. We don't do that anymore. It is a tax abatement, but the idea that there's no cost associated with that is not right. It does give us less tax revenue over time. That tax revenue would be used to help support the services needed for the added development. If you think about all the things downtown that require city services and are not doing their share of paying for them, also the people who use those services are not doing their fair share of paying for it. If they don't live in the city, they don't pay any taxes. There are no fees. There are no excise taxes. There are not the things that other cities around the country use to make these things worthwhile for the citizens. And we do need to start thinking about how we get there in Detroit.
The other piece that intrigued me, Steve, was what he's doing with this big tranche of Biden bucks he has, the ARPA money and the COVID money, and the community partnerships he's trying to build for things like, fighting crime and building job skills and getting affordable housing. But the crime one is particularly intriguing, engaging community groups to bid on certain areas. Got $10 million pool here. You can get a grant for $750,000, pick a neighborhood and see if you can do things to address the root cause of violence in this community. If it works, I mean, it'll be brilliant. And, there is reason to hope that it might work. Nothing else. It's been tried in other places to mix results, but I mean, this is a program that's going to take a lot of accountability and a lot of oversight when you start throwing that kind of money out there and saying, hey, come up with an idea for fighting violence.
I mean, the metrics are the key here, right? How do you decide that what somebody or a group is doing is making some place safer? How do we define safer? How do we limit the threat of vigilantism when you do this kind of thing? Not that that's what people's proclivity is, but it's a possibility. Right. Managing these kind of things and deciding when they work is going to be the hardest part of it. And you're right, if they can pull that off and get some things that actually have success, it'll be great. But you do worry about that approach and how we make sure that it's aimed at actual safety.
Another priority on the mayor's agenda is making improvements to the city's transportation system for disabled residents. The city's paratransit services have come under criticism by riders, and efforts are underway to find a new long-term provider. One Detroit contributor, Bryce Huffman, met up with a frequent rider to find out more about her experiences with the service.
It's 4:30 a.m. on East Ferry Street. The roads are nearly empty on this early Friday morning, but Detroiter Melody Williams is up and waiting for the paratransit van to arrive. Getting up this early is just part of her weekday routine. Today, she's using it to get to her dialysis treatment.
On Mondays, I do dialysis. So I get a one-way trip. My day starts at 3 o'clock in the morning, and my ride is from 4:30 to 5. Around about 10 o'clock, I'm off the machine, and then my family members come and pick me up, and then I go to work. And then in the afternoon, I get off about 2:30, so I have another ride scheduled for Metrolift. That's on Monday. And on Tuesday from 9, I go to work, and Wednesday back to dialysis. Thursday, work again. And then on Fridays, I do dialysis.
The van picks up and drops off other passengers on the way to Williams' treatment. Like many people using the service, Williams is visually impaired.
It's considered as legally blind, so I have vision, but not clarity. It's like if you put a Ziploc bag to your eye, that's what I see.
Williams has been legally blind since 2010. She spent 10 months in Kalamazoo learning to navigate life without full vision. That included learning how to catch the bus now that she couldn't drive herself.
When I came back to Detroit, I wanted to continue that, so I want to be stuck in the house and dependent on my girlfriends or my aunt or my sons or my friends, different people, my neighbor, to take me backwards and forth. I signed up for Metrolift.
Metrolift is Detroit's paratransit service, a transportation option specifically for people living with disabilities or other mobility challenges. Williams has been using the service since 2017. How do you make the decision to schedule or get a ride from someone else?
When I do dialysis on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, when I get off that machine about 10 o'clock, I'll be extremely sick and weak. So therefore, if I take Metrolift, it's no telling when I might get home and how I'm gonna make it. So therefore, my family members will come and pick me up on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Everybody got a certain day.
In November, City Council voted against a new contract for Transdev, the company that operated the paratransit service. Riders who used the service often complain about how unreliable the company was. Williams said drivers would leave passengers in the wrong locations, pick them up late, and sometimes not pick them up at all.
It's sometimes frustrating, but we don't have no other choice. How we gonna get to the doctors? How we gonna get to the grocery store? How we gonna get to our treatments, cancer patients and stuff? They use Metrolift as well. They be on scooters. It's horrible.
Detroit's paratransit service could look very different by summer, however. At the Detroit Department of Transportation office, we sat down with Mikel Oglesby. He's the executive director of transit for the city. At the end of last year, obviously, there was a little bit of a debate about if there should be a contract extension or approval for Transdev. A lot of folks in the ADA community weren't fans of them. Could you briefly describe just kind of how that resolved itself from when the contract was rejected to where we are now?
Sure, it's pretty straightforward. We put out an RFP, a request for proposal for service. There were two providers that responded. One was Peoples and one was Transdev. The end result was that the 30% Peoples Express were approved and the other 70% was not.
In December, Mayor Mike Duggan used his emergency powers to make a temporary fix to the problem.
I was really excited that he gave us the tools to do our job, and that was to move forward with additional providers to be able to fill that gap.
The city started seeking out new bids for the long-term contract last month. Now that DDOT runs the entire system, what sort of changes have you noticed as the person in charge of running the system, and what have you been hearing from the people who use the paratransit system?
Well, I will tell you, we took it over the beginning of the year, and the response has been like night and day. They like the customer service. We're providing professional service. We are handling complaints expeditiously, and the overall general response is very positive.
But what do people who rely on the system, like Williams, say about the new companies providing service? And how does she compare it to Transdev? You rode with Peoples Express today. If you could rate them out of 10, what would you rate Peoples Express? And then what would you rate Transdev out of 10?
Okay, Peoples, they always got good drivers. And therefore, one thing I like about Peoples now, they have cars. So therefore, a lot of seniors that cannot get up in those high vans can get in a lower car. So I say they service for now I give them about an 8, 8.5.
Okay, that's pretty good. And what about TransDev?
0.
And as for the long-term solution, 6 months from now, what do you want to see happen? What would you like to see DDOT do?
I would like them to be consistent with our drivers, consistent, a clean van. Take care of your seniors. Get out of the car and help them when you know they handicap and they barely can get in. Definitely be on time. I know sometimes it's hard to do that because when you're working with a large city, it's more than one client. It's over 1,000 rides a day.
The Department of Justice is now looking to ensure the city isn't violating the Americans with Disabilities Act by failing disabled passengers.
So I understand it's hard, but they need a better system, a much better system than what we have now.
March is Women's History Month, and One Detroit is placing the spotlight on one of Detroit's trailblazing female musicians. Renowned jazz drummer Gayelynn McKinney has made her mark playing an instrument that is traditionally more popular among men. McKinney sat down with One Detroit contributor Cecelia Sharpe to talk about the barriers she's broken through as a female drummer, her work with the all-female jazz band Straight Ahead, and the launch of her Women Who Drum festival last year.
And we are celebrating Women's History Month, celebrating women in music. And my guest today is one of Detroit's finest drummers, Mrs. Gayelynn McKinney. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you for having me, see?
Absolutely. Now, Gayelynn, you come from a musical family. Your father is the legendary Harold McKinney. Your mother is a well-noted singer. Your siblings are musicians, trumpeters, singers, you name it. So you had no choice.
I had no choice.
But to become a musician.
Yeah.
You started playing drums at the age of 2.
I got my first official lesson at 9 from Ike Daney. God rest his soul. He's not here either anymore. But he also started teaching me officially, like rudiments and things like that at 9.
So what made you, because you were playing the clarinet and saxophone, you were great. You already beat out the first chair. You challenged the first chair saxophonist within your first month of playing and won.
Mm-hmm.
What made you stick with the drums?
Nobody knew I played drums until one particular day. The drums were out. And I said, oh, I went over there and I started playing on the snare and doing some stuff. Everybody in the class went, oh, and they was looking at me like, oh my gosh, she's playing the drums. And clearly, I obviously knew what I was doing, so that was very surprising to everyone. And so after that day, I was standing at the bus stop on my way home from school, and this little girl was looking at me like, and I was like, what's wrong with you? And she said, you were playing the drums. And I said, mm-hmm, yeah. And she said, well, you're a girl. I said, yeah, I know that. And she said, but you were playing the drums. I said, yeah. She said, well, you're not supposed to be playing the drums. The drums are for boys.
Wow.
And that really hurt my feelings. I was like, well, I'm a girl. I like to play the drums. When my father came home from New York one day, he had been doing some music there. And he didn't know how I was feeling. He just knew, he never knew I was thinking about quitting. And so he just came in all excited. Guess what? I said, what? I saw another little girl playing the drums. I said, really? He said, yeah. She was playing with Clark Terry. And she's about 8 years old. So I'm 10 and she's 8. And that drummer was Terry Lynn Carrington. And so that was all I needed. I just needed to know that there was some other girl playing this instrument, because I never saw any other girl playing the instrument when I was coming up playing the drums.
I didn't think that you would face flack, for lack of a better word, but catching heat from girls from playing drums. So did you find that you were more welcomed by the guys, or?
It was just the one little girl really that said something about it.
Okay.
The boys just would, they would be, I think they were in shock. They were too in shock to even say anything. So as I got in my older years though, that's when I really started to see from guys that they weren't quite that happy that I was playing the drums, especially doing like jam sessions.
Please help me welcome Straight Ahead.
Right after college, you joined a group called Straight Ahead, an all-female jazz ensemble. How did that band come about?
That band came about thanks to a woman named Mickey Braden, who was trying to find some musicians to perform at this club called Bert's Place. And it used to be on Jefferson, right across from Hart Plaza. And she couldn't find anybody. Everybody was busy. So she called me and she said, "Hey, Gayelynn, I'm trying to put a band together for Bert's Place for a Monday night gig." And Monday is not a good night, but I guess word started circulating that there was an all-female jazz group playing. And like I said, we weren't tiptoeing through the tulips, we was hitting. So by the next couple of weeks, a couple of weeks later, we had like 20 people come in the club. By the end of the second month, there was a line going outside of Bert's Place.
On a Monday?
On a Monday, from people wanting to see this all-female group.
Last year in 2022, you launched a festival, Women Who Drum. Tell us about that festival and the mission and purpose of Women Who Drum.
So I started this thing because I play at Baker's Keyboard Lounge on Fridays and Saturdays with the great Ralph Armstrong and Gerard Gibbs. And I've been doing this now since February of 21. And do you know that almost every weekend, one night out of that weekend, sometimes 2 nights out of that weekend, somebody says, "Wow, you're the first woman drummer I've ever seen." That's when the idea came to me. I said, well, I'm gonna start this festival because people here need to see and know that there's more than just me out here doing this. For one thing, I love performing. I love playing for people, especially who appreciate it. And so I feel obligated to give them a show. If you come to see me, I feel obligated to give you a show. You came to see me perform, so I'm gonna give you something back. So that you're gonna leave happy because you're gonna know I put my all into it,
And you can see Gayelynn McKinney perform at the Dirty Dog Jazz Cafe through March 11th. Now, let's take a look at some of the other events and activities in the Detroit area this weekend and beyond. Here's Cecelia Sharpe of WRCJ 90.9 with today's One Detroit Weekend.
Hi, I'm C Sharpe with 90.9 WRCJ. The weekend is so close. Here are some fun things to check out in and around the Detroit area this weekend and into next. Interested in taking in some contemporary fine art? You can head to Cass Corridor to check out the multi-artist exhibition, Resonance Reverence, at Gallery Camille. On Saturday, March 11th, groove to the music of the legendary Stevie Wonder with the Detroit City Jazz Orchestra Plus at the DSO's Cube. I have so many favorite Stevie Wonder songs, but don't you always feel good when you hear Sir Duke? What's your favorite? And the Academy Award goes to? Well, we won't know until Sunday night. But if you're wanting to experience the magic of cinema, the Detroit Film Theater is showing this year's Oscar-nominated short films on the big screen through Saturday, March 11th. On Sunday, March 12th, Step Africa takes to the stage at Hill Auditorium in Ann Arbor. This dance company is dedicated to the African-American tradition of stepping. Enjoy their blend of percussive dance styles from historically African-American fraternities and sororities, contemporary dance and art forms, and traditional West and Southern African dances. It all makes for a high energy performance you won't want to miss. There's so much happening around the city. Here's more of what's coming up ahead. Hope to see you around. Have a fantastic weekend.
That will do it for this week's One Detroit. Thanks for watching. Head to the One Detroit website for all of the stories we're working on. Follow us on social media and sign up for our weekly newsletter.
From Delta Faucets to Behr Paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Support for this program is provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV, the Kresge Foundation.
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public TV, among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving. We support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Visit dtefoundation.com to learn more.
Nissan Foundation, and viewers like you.